Calico Willie. What's up, Calico Willie? Howdy, John. So with the latest AP poll coming out in Big 12 getting gross with the rankings, do you think when the college football rankings, the playoff rankings come, it'll be any better? Will you lead me into an interesting position here, Calico Willie? I had somebody pushing me on this. So let me tell you a little story. I was doing the Three-Ma post-game podcast after the West Virginia game yesterday. Was talking with my guy Cole on the podcast, and he made a comment. We were talking about like, hey, there's got to be some scenario, right? I was saying K-State just win games. From a K-State perspective, you're looking at it like, man, Iowa State and BYU keep winning. Is there a concern about not getting into the Big 12 championship game? And I said, just keep winning. Maybe there is some if Texas Tech wins out and you're like tied with them and Iowa State, and it's a three-way tiebreaker, and then you didn't actually play Texas Tech this year, but I just win and it'll take care of itself. And then Cole said, yeah, and if you get there and you're 11-1 and somehow you didn't make it in, like you're good chance you're getting in the playoff anyway. And that's where I was like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, because it feels like in this world, like things have just tilted so much toward the Big Ten and the SEC that I would have my doubts about anything other than just stacking the field with more at-large bids from those two conferences. But I got some pushback. From my guy MJ here that I'm going to show you, who always makes me think with his responses, and I very much appreciate them. Let me show you here. MJ said, don't let John or anyone else talk you out of an 11-1 K-State or any other Power Four getting an at-large bid. In the college football playoff era, there's never been a Power Five one-loss team lower than seventh in the final playoff poll. Oddly enough, the team to finish seventh has been Ohio State twice. You can see there, I just said, hey, I'd love to be wrong, but the system is designed to juice up the Big Ten and SEC. And he said the committee is different every year, most of whom aren't tied to the Big Ten or SEC, and the committee has largely been fair. And so, I honestly had to stop and think about that for a moment. And I was like, well, I really hadn't even been thinking of it in the context of like, what has the committee done in the past? It was more this new world where revenue sharing has come into play, and there's so much more money in the Big Ten and SEC. And the Big Ten and SEC are basically saying, we run the show. We're the captains now. We run the ship. We can take our ball and go home if we want to. And I hadn't thought about, well, there actually will be a committee that can determine a lot of this and the way that all that goes. And that the SEC and Big Ten, have even talked about, hey, do we need a committee? I mean, that's a part of the discussions that are happening right now. Is they're like meeting in Nashville and all this stuff is like, can we get rid of a committee? Because they fear what a committee might do, which would play into MJ's point there that perhaps I am being way too cynical about all that. And so when I started thinking back through to this, I'm like, okay, well, 2022, 2 years ago, the K-State team that wins the Big 12 championship game and played in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, they got into the top 10 at the end of the regular season in the college football playoff rankings at 9-3. They had 3 losses. That was a 3-loss K-State team that had lost to Tulane, who wound up in the Cotton Bowl. They were the Cotton Bowl champs, actually, so that didn't look like a bad loss. They lost a game to TCU, and they lost a game to Texas. TCU, obviously, that's the year that they're in the playoff. So there's 2 New Year's Six Bowl winners, by the way, because they won the Fiesta Bowl. And then Texas, who was still pretty good and just missed the Big 12 championship game. So 9-3 with those 3 losses, K-State was still ranked in the top 10 of the playoff rankings. And so, hey, that's actually a fair point to bring up. Committee has been not always throwing the Big 12 down the toilet. Now, the other factor here is that this is a Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. So will there be a bit of a different treatment because of that? That's another part of my cynicism. But if I'm being totally honest, I would say MJ has a point that I am a little too into the minutia of the day-to-day of all the stuff with house settlement, revenue sharing, realignment, TV contract. Like, I'm too involved in all that. And that environment is so heavily slanted toward the Big Ten and the SEC that it's hard to take a step out from that. Take a step away from here's what the Big Ten or SEC is really demanding or wanting out of that. Now, the problem with it all is if MJ is correct and we do wind up with 11-1 teams from the ACC or the Big 12 making it in, or even 10-2 teams from the Big 12 or ACC making it in favor of SEC or Big 10 teams, they will just take their ball and go home. That's when you could start to see, well, one of two things. Either a break off and them doing their own playoff, or tightening up the screws on this kind of collusion thing that they've got going on of only playing each other in non-conference games and adding extra auto bids to the playoff when it expands to 14. I will give you this little bit from John Wilner at the Wilner Hotline, who I thought put this, summed it up very well. He said, yes, humans are involved for now. The SEC and Big Ten are assessing the viability of the selection committee in the next version of the playoff. Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti have made no secret of the scrutiny they plan to place on the process, particularly on the emphasis given to strength of schedule. In short, they don't want 2-loss teams from the ACC and Big 12 to receive at-large bids at the expense of 3-loss teams from their leagues that will, in theory, have played stronger schedules. Easy example, Georgia finishes 9-3 with close losses to Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee, but is left out of the playoff in favor of 2-loss Iowa State, K-State, or Miami. Sankey would blow a gasket. So, yeah, I mean, that's what's there. But it doesn't mean that this year, doesn't mean that they're going to stop it now. The selection committee can put one of those teams in, and at 11-1, yeah, probably a much better chance that happens. So I will soften my stance on that. Thank you, MJ, and thank you, Calico Willie, bringing Calico Willie back in here. So I guess my long-winded answer to that, Calico, to put a bow on that, is that I would expect that they are a bit better. I would think that they will be slightly more encouraging based on some of that history. That's a hunch. Now, the K-State strength of schedule that year, I'm sure, was rating very high. I don't know that Iowa State or BYU are going to have something that is at that level. But I would still imagine that it would be a little bit better based on recent history. Okay, I've got one more big point to hit for you here, but let me run through some of these. R-Web, love to see you, R-Web. Utah going to run the Big 12, huh? Utah running the Big 12. Not exactly. Who among us have gone out there and laid just a 7-point egg at home against TCU? Who among us? Alan, John, in this crazy year, if KU wins out, they might be in the conversation or at least go to a bowl game. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen, what is Kansas? They have 3 conference losses because there were 2 non-cons. They lost to UNLV and Illinois, so it's 2-5 and 1-3 in the league. So if you won out 5-3, you're not going to be in the. I don't think you're going to be in the championship game if you won out there. You have a lot. I mean, the at-large thing, it's definitely out. So the conversation that we're having there is, would you be on the periphery of the Big 12 championship game? If there was a lot of chaos, you perhaps could be. Now, you see there the opponents KU has coming up: K-State, Iowa State, BYU. Those are, to me, and Colorado and Baylor. So to me, the top 4 there, if you beat all of them, then you're going to be in a better position tiebreaker wise, and you would have given them a loss. So we are talking about things getting a lot crazier at that point in time. I suppose there is still an outside chance, if Kansas were to do that they could make all that happen. But man, I mean, they're going to BYU, which, I mean, that's the toughest place to play in the Big 12 this year right now, based on results and what we've seen. You're going to BYU, you're going to K-State, the Iowa State game's at Arrowhead, so there are going to be a lot of Cyclone fans there. You're kind of just the Colorado game, I think, is at Arrowhead as well. So really, like, only one of those is mostly a home game. It's just going to be a tough gauntlet. But that's an interesting conversation point, Alan, and a pretty good hypothetical on that.